And we welcome you back to the Talk Shop in Studio 255. I'm Eric Henderson, and the Candidate Awareness Tour 2026 is rolling on here as we approach August 18th. That's the primary for Wyoming, and early voting begins July 21st, and that is going to mean Albany County Commissioner race candidates vying for your votes. We want to send you to the polls the most informed possible. The best vote is an informed vote, and we have in Studio 255 this morning Pete Gosar, current county commissioner for Albany County. And Pete, welcome to the program.
Eric, good morning. What a great opportunity. Thanks for having me. And you're outside this morning and you realize why you live in Albany County. What a beautiful morning. So thanks for having me here.
It's really good to have candidates who show up, and I appreciate you being one of those. You did so earlier in the Talk Shop history. 10 years we celebrate this year in 93.5's 25th year of operation, in America's 250th year of celebration. What's the county doing for the 250th celebration this year?
Well, we've got a bunch of stuff going on, and people will, if they go by the courthouse, they'll see that World War I memorial. We shined it up, and later rethought it. It's a fantastic. They should go take a look. Time had encrusted over some of the names, and now they're pulled back out to remember their sacrifice. And there'll be events all throughout the county over the years. And I really do appreciate, 10 years for you, 25 for Coca, 250 for the country. There's some symmetry there. So thanks. It's great to be here.
It's also a wonderful time because in an election year, the citizens have a greater feeling of influence and that they matter. And you're big on community, building community. How are you going to celebrate with building community in Albany County this year?
Well, I think if people are familiar with how I run for election, I'm pretty old school. I think you go out and you campaign, and you're a commissioner just like you're a campaigner. So if you work hard and you listen to folks, I think that carries over to being a commissioner. I'm always available. I'll always answer phone calls. I'll always answer emails. I don't have all the answers, and I'll tell you up front many times when I don't know what I'm talking about, and I'll go get the answers. And I think that's important. It's about trust. It's about relationships. So much more gets done when you can work with folks. And even if you disagree, sometimes as a commissioner, you have to tell people no, and that's not a nice thing to have to tell people, and it's obviously not a nice thing to hear. But if you have that trust, if you have that relationship, if people think you're giving it to them straight, they're more able to deal with it with a no answer.
For those that might not know you,
yeah,
who is Pete Gosar?
Well, I'm just a guy who loves this community, born and raised in Wyoming, came here to the university, and then left for a little while. And I remember coming back 18 years ago it was, and I thought I'd be in Albany County. I was working out of Denver, but I could live in Laramie. I knew I could live in Laramie. Denver was a bit big. And I thought, well, I'll just be here for one more year. I knew my life was transitioning. And then I looked around and I thought, look at this community, right? They care about each other. They have really amazing investments in each other. Where places won't invest in their library, we'll build a rec center. And I think that's really important. And I think about all the nonprofit agencies that I get the great pleasure to work with, the Soup Kitchen and Interfaith and Safe Project, all to help people in our community. And I think that really carries over, and it's a reason I live here. You
are running for re-election. And what inspires you to carry forward as a person who's done the job, looking to continue doing the job? What drives you to do that?
Well, I think there's more to do. I think about all the things that we can get done working together as a commission, but also with the city. I'm very proud of trying to build bridges with the city. I remember when I first came in as a commissioner, we had this decades-long tension, dust up over the detention center. And that was just, for me, a nonsensical thing, right? It had to be done. It had to work. So you just roll up your sleeves, say hi to the next person, grab a cup of coffee, and say, how do we get this done? What makes sense for both the city and the county? Because in the end, we're working for everybody, right? 80% of the county lives in the city, right? And so how do we get the detention center worked out? And what took less than had 20 years in the making. I think with Sheriff Applehans and some other folks, took 6 months to get done, and that was a really important thing.
I heard about some negotiations that began as far back as perhaps August 2025, maybe even before that, with respect to the penny tax recently passed May 5th of 2026, continuing on since 1987. There was some negotiation that happened between the city and Rock River and the county. What are you most proud of with respect to that collaboration and negotiation, if you will?
Well, what I'm really most proud of, Eric, is that the people of Albany County felt it important to invest in themselves. And so that overwhelming support was great. But I think negotiation with people and working with people, the county really needed a new infrastructure. We have 6 or 7 buildings throughout the city here. That's a difficult way to produce services. We'd like a one place where people can go. And I think that hopefully the electorate thought that was important. Now, there was some back and forth with the city and back and forth with Rock River, but we hammered it out, and I think for the first time the county got a larger share of this spet tax than other times in the past. And I think it was really important to make your case, to have relationships, and to say, this time we need to build a building that will serve the people of Albany County in one spot. So the public health is not separate from the police station, which is not separate from planning, which is not separate, from the clerk's office. One spot where people can go and get their business done.
One interesting aspect to the May 5th presentation of the ballot was the distinctive separation of Laramie Regional Airport as its own entity, not one of the Rock River government interests, the town of Rock River or the city of Laramie or the Albany County. Obviously, it's in Albany County. What was the discussion that led to that interesting aspect?
I think it's hard to understand how some of the things have different ways that can create it. So the airport board is a joint powers board, jointly between the city and the county. And so separating that out, it is distinct for both the county and the city and Rock River. And so when you ask,
joint powers board,
you bet. And when you're asking people specific purposes for their taxes, you separate it out. You be clear. This is for the airport, and this is what they want to do with it. That's what I really like about the specific purpose tax. It goes directly. You designate places for it to go, and so people know where their tax dollars are going. It's not going to some amorphous fund that somebody will use somewhere else. It says, hey, we're going to put this money towards the airport or this money towards Rock River in this way.
And when did you first run for Albany County Commissioner and begin serving the community in this capacity?
Yeah, so about 10 years ago, I ran in 2017 and was elected in the fall of 2017, started in January of 2018. I thought that, community is a real place that you can get some things done. It's hard to get the state moving. It's hard to get the federal government moving. We're all watching that. But can you go and do community? Can you make a difference? And hopefully some things have happened that were part of the work that I did.
And when it comes to important issues, when you first started, you came into concerns about aquifer protection. Where does that stand today, and where would you like to take it in another term?
Well, I'm really proud of the work that's been done with the aquifer. Without water, you really don't have anything. We have this amazing resource, this aquifer, but it is fragile and can be fouled. And so how do we do planning? How do we do zoning to protect that aquifer? We've done the best we can. I think there's more to do with regard to some of that work. I think as I think about mobile home parks in our community, I'm really disappointed, that large out-of-state venture capitalists have come in and bought mobile home parks and just raising the rates on people and have installed utility meters that may or may not accurately reflect what the utilities being used. And as a commissioner, I've asked, what can I do? And the answer comes again back. This is a private contract between the mobile home park and the mobile home user. Now that's an unbalanced power structure, right? Not many people in a mobile home park can hire an attorney to ferret out their cases. And so I've been constantly pushing, how do we make this better? And that there's a few things we can do. They're going to be outside the box, maybe. And if venture capital is going to do that to people in our community, then maybe the community needs to push back on that.
When it comes to affordable housing, what measures do you advocate for Albany County to initiate or continue that will promote that being realized in Wyoming?
Well, I think you have to have a plan, and I think you have to be consistent about what that plan should look like. I think if you try to build where there already is infrastructure, that makes sense. You don't have to run pipes, you don't have to run sewer, you don't have to run water to distant places. And then how do you join together as a community and say, you know what, can we offset the cost? Can we put people in houses that maybe the city owns or the county owns the ground underneath, but they own the property, and there's a 3%, the next time they go to sell it, they can only realize a 3% gain on their condo. Something like those have been done within places that have a bigger problem than us, Jackson, for instance. And I think some of that really matters. It does matter for us to find a solution to housing, right? We have to keep our young folks here. And the best way to do it is find them a place to live, right? And it shouldn't be a shack somewhere in the middle of nowhere. Make it affordable. Make the idea that this is going to be something that people start here and maybe they move on to a different house when their jobs and their lives allow it to. But then the next generation will be able to use this condominium or this affordable housing to start their lives on the right path.
What source do we use in Albany County governance that tells us that there's a housing shortage, there's a housing affordability problem? I hear comparisons nationwide to our local community, but what resource does the county commissioner group use to reference as you attack these important issues?
Yeah, so I think about median income of people working, and then how that relates to either rent or mortgage payments. And right now, it's difficult for people in the median world or the range of jobs and incomes to afford a house in Albany County. So we have two ends that we have to work on. How do we raise people's income? And then how do we lower housing? And how do we make those two places come closer together? Those are the statistics I use. I mean, I think days on the market and all that stuff, those are interesting and fun, right, to think about. And maybe they color the marks.
In the real estate industry itself.
Yeah. But I think about, can people afford it and why they can't? And I think we need to work on raising people's wages here. And how do we lower the cost of housing? Both of those will help you out in the end.
What do you use as the criteria as a Albany County Commissioner, obviously viewing and witnessing city of Laramie operations and decisions, be it annexation or others? Where do you draw the line and respect the governance of city of Laramie versus take into account a role as a commissioner in making comment or referencing or having dialogue with city? What's that city-county relationship barrier for you? What are your lines of that guide you in dealing with day-to-day governance?
You know, we both are governed by statute, and so you have to have fidelity to statute. But beyond that, where do you get wins, right? And where does it serve the people of Albany County? And those, I think, are built with relationships. So I feel like I have good working relationships with all of the people on the city council. And we might have differences of opinion. That's fine, right? But can you sit down and say, hey, you know, the county's interests lie here. We see where your interests lie. The long-range growth area plan was a perfect example of that. You know, the mile ring outside the city. If Laramie continues to grow, we have to think that will need to be part of the city one day. How do you plan now so that streets match up, so that sewer pipes match up, so that you have a place where residents will live and it's not next to industrial parks, and at places that do heavy chemicals and that stuff aren't next to schools. And that takes place right now for 20, 30 years in the future. And so how do you think about it And then how do you leverage it with people in the relationship? Say, hey, I know you're a member of the city council and you have a different set of ideas. Where can we meet? Right? What makes sense for the people of Albany County, for the people of the city of Laramie? I think if you always maintain your focus on the people and what makes sense for them, I think you by and large will get there.
Are special districts allowed by Wyoming statutes a important asset to building revenue sources for Albany County?
They are, but they're tricky, right? And so there's very little that we can do with regard to the governance, and maybe that's fine, but sometimes special districts won't have the boards in place that they should. And we are unable to populate those boards. And so sometimes you watch a road district or a sewer district, quite honestly, be failing. And there's not much you can do as a commissioner other than say, hey, could you get some people in there? Can we get this right? Because it's important for us, and the state makes us certify that their work is done correctly. And so there's a tension between what we can do and maybe sometimes what we should do.
In the last few years, I remember much discussion over many decades on Boswell Drive, the road, Boswell Road closure, as it was known from the Jelm Road to near Waikolo Lodge, and that was not an easy topic. Much public input, much Forest Service input. There's a quasi multi entity interest in that particular issue. How did you navigate that in your term as commissioner personally?
Well, I think it's nice to go out and see the world on the ground. And so I traveled out there and I talked to the person first on that road with the ability to put a gate up. Gentleman was a kind and generous person that talked about the change in camping over his career. Certainly he bought a house that had a road running next to it. And then you do the research and you realize the county has no easements on this road, right? And although previous commissioners had made it a county road, they hadn't followed the statute and the letter to make that such. And so we started to work with the Forest Service and private landowners to say, how do we keep this open, right? We don't have any easements. We have no right to keep this road open as a county. It's my opinion that you only condemn places, you only eminent domain in places where you need safety and security as a concern. That didn't fit for me. And so can we work with the Forest Service? We tried really hard. There were some solutions along the way. The Forest Service did have some easements, and we were ready to go.
At one point, I recall, you spoke explicitly. You had equipment staged and ready to proceed in care of that road and the development of what was needed at the time, but you weren't able to proceed. Tell us more about that.
You just can't dig on the Forest Service land. They have to give you the go-ahead. And we had our road and bridge ready to go. It was staked out, and I'm not sure what happened to the Forest Service. But at some point, the road and bridge guy called me and said, Pete, the snow's going to fly here pretty soon. It was getting to be September and October. He's like, we're going to get our stuff out of here before it's too late. And that was a frustration, right? I thought there were solutions. I thought that there were reasonable ways to do what was required. And reasonable does not mean taking somebody's land. I don't believe that. And so I'm disappointed by what happened. But I think we had to be honest. And so for the first time, I think our commission was really honest and said, somebody said that this was a county road, but they had no right to do that. We have no property. We have no easements. If the Forest Service wants to do it, then they can do it. They have the land. I'm not sure we should just step the way out of this one and get it into us being out of it so that maybe it solves itself.
Recent commission meetings have held topics of permit extensions for that which many refer to as rail tie. Is there anything you'd like to share with Albany County voters with respect to that topic as it goes forward? How important is wind energy and that type of permit being extended in the county?
Yeah, I think so. Two parts to that question. It's incredibly important. With what had been done at the legislature with property taxes, the county would have had a $1.9 million deficit this last year. That's a big deal for a budget that has $19 million. That's 10%. So wind, the Boswell and Rock Creek had bought some turbines and some blades and some stuff that had sales tax had really covered that, almost all of that hole. 600,000 was the deficit we experienced. So it is a big, important part to us doing the work of the county. So rail tie, I'll pivot to that. That was the most vetted, most public commented project in my tenure at the commission. We took one whole night and went up to the district court, which was filled, by the way, which is great, right? People have the right and we have the obligation to listen. And we took comments for 5 hours. I've got notebooks filled of the public comment. And so we did, some of those comments changed the permitting of rail tie, the lights, right, the sound, putting in bird detection systems. These were all really important pieces that changed the permitting. And so I feel fairly comfortable that that was vetted as best as we could. And so now the permitting came 5 years later. And we had to find either that it was viable or that it had been substantially begun. I'm not sure I felt as comfortable as substantially completed as viable. The company was there, they're ready to go. They've been vindicated in court, all the 3 or 4 cases that have been put in front of them. And so you have to give people the opportunity. In 5 years, if they're not someplace else, if they're not further along the project, that the project's not complete, then it goes back and we restart the clock again and we go right all over and start the permitting process from the very beginning. So I think this is an important piece. Albany County is not, we don't have resources that come out of the ground. That's a really important piece. Property taxes for us, it's 30 to 35% of our budget. In Campbell County, Gillette, it's 3%. So this property tax discussion means nothing to them. For us, it means everything. And when 85% of your budget is spent on people, you make big cuts to that budget, you reduce people, and that's just the way it goes. And so wind, solar, any way we can make a few bucks to bring in the sales tax, bring in the jobs, we have to really consider. We have to balance the character of our community and what the world we would love to build in Albany County versus what's being asked for us.
Now, in the May 5th special election ballot, a new grandstand for Albany County Fairgrounds was approved. Mm-hmm. What's that feel like to have a new endeavor on the horizon for you as a county commissioner looking to be reelected?
Well, I think it's a great opportunity to invest in yourself. Jubilee Days is a big event here. And can we make it a bigger event? They're doing great work out at the fairgrounds to try to bring in other income so that they're more sustainable. Parking and pet storage and all of that stuff has been really helpful. And they have a real nice vision for the fairgrounds. That was the initial piece, that grandstand's old. Some places, it's a little creaky. So do we build it and build it right? And then maybe we can host a few more events. Maybe not just the Jubilee Day Rodeo. Maybe you can have a concert out there. Maybe you can do some other stuff that brings income into the community. So I really think it's a great opportunity.
Is Albany County government right size, or do we need to adjust more or less from where we stand today?
Well, I think we're the biggest county population-wise with the smallest commission. And that brings some set of challenges. If a person, I take conflict of interest incredibly important. And so if I feel like I have a place that I shouldn't be speaking on the topic, I won't speak on the topic, and oftentimes I'll leave the room. If that happens too many times, you might have one person. If you only have 3 commissioners making a decision, I don't think that's how it's supposed to be. So maybe we could think about a few more commissioners. But I think what's not really known, Eric, is our road and bridge is still smaller than it was in 2017. Now we don't have less roads. We don't have less travel on roads. And so I think people really need to understand that we tried, and some of the economics has kept our budgets tight. But sometimes you're jumping over a quarter to pick up a nickel. And services really do matter. I'm concerned about the People's Initiative. That $500,000 or $600,000.
The 50% property tax consideration that'll be on the general ballot.
You bet. Those will make we'll have to have real conversations. I think we've done property tax relief here just super well, and I don't take any credit. I give the credit to the assessor, the clerk, and the treasurer's office to say who are those people who need it, who are those people who are really struggling, and going out and being proactive and saying, hey, this is available. I think if other counties would have done what we did with regard to property tax for people on fixed incomes, I don't think we'd had this on the ballot. And I made that case at the Wyoming County Commission Association, and I guess it didn't carry the day.
Where was that meeting held, that one you just spoke of, the association?
Well, we go every year in February at the legislature. And I really do think that if counties would have done what Albany County did and Lincoln County did, some of the poor counties, interestingly enough, were the most generous in their property tax rebates. We would having a different conversation. And so, unfortunately, it's those poor counties that probably would be the most impacted by the property tax.
3 elected officials in 2 consecutive years that I'm aware of, maybe longer, Albany County Clerk, Albany County Assessor, and Albany County Treasurer, all 3, and yourself. This last year I saw you in Rock River, available to the people, presenting considerations through information primarily, and giving exclusive opportunity, one-on-one, face-to-face opportunity to, within that meeting, the constraints of the meeting, you guys were available to talk about the impacts of various scenarios. And 2 years ago, there were at least 8 different property tax initiatives that were being considered in collaboratively. Clerk, assessor, and treasurer united in being available to answer questions. You attend some of those meetings. What's that mean to building community from your standpoint?
I think it's all about education, right? I don't care what part of the political spectrum you're on. I have this idea that 90% of the people want to do the right thing, right? They're really good citizens, and they want to have a strong government. They want strong communities. And so sometimes the education piece is the most difficult piece. Where do your property taxes go? I don't think people make the ties that goes to the sheriff's department, that goes to the clerk's office, that goes to the road and bridge. So help to make that connection for folks. And then just be available, right? We're not some figurehead somewhere else. We're here in your community. We're just like you, except that we thought we could maybe stand for an election. I think that's important. I think the most important part of campaign season for me is going door to door. There's nothing else. I mean, parade's are great, and that's fine. But going door to door, I'll start with, hey, I'm Pete Gosar. I'm running for county commissioner. How could we improve in the county? And then I'll write it down. And you catch some really great ideas, some amazing ideas that you say, hey, you mind if I bring that to the next event? Do you mind if I bring that? Because all of us have a better solution set than just one of us. And I think if you do that, if you're available, if you'll take the calls, if you'll reply to the emails, I think people have respect. Even if they don't vote for you, even if they don't support one of this stuff, they go, well, that person's trying. And I think in the end, that's what you got to be as a commissioner or as a treasurer, as an assessor, a person who tries, a person who's approachable, and then a person who can say many times, I don't know, but I'll find out the answer. I think people understand that and expect that.
At many meetings, at least several that I can recall, you have presented a investment and return on investment parallel for people, and for every dollar we get 16 times that in value and stuff. Share that with the audience if you don't mind, if you can take yourself back in time and connect with what I'm talking about. You do that parallel as explicitly as anybody I've known. And I think it's important for people to hear it from you directly. And this is an opportunity with many viewers, many shares on the Talk Shop to do that and spread that word, because it's a great formula that you put forward. And I have a follow-up question on that.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I really do believe the community that we have is the community we want to have, the community that we will invest in. And so I'll steal this from Bob at ARC Services. It's like, what community do you want? Do you want a community that cares for people with developmental disabilities who have meaningful lives? Then you need to invest in it. Albany County has been great about it. That's the reason I live here. I'm certain of it. And I think we have to invest in ourselves. I think about community solutions to healthcare, community solutions to housing, community solutions to energy systems, because the answers are here. The expertise is here. How do we ask people to get uncomfortable and help us, right? How do we, I think it was really important to put solar panels on the roof of the courthouse and the IT building and out at SARS. You know, the return on investment is 17 years at current rates. Well, as the rates go up, years come off all of a sudden. And now you lock in your rates of electricity at the time when you bought it. And so I think it's important to think about investments, not only in energy systems, but in social services. You know, the Soup Kitchen does an amazing job for this community. Interfaith does a SAFE project, developmental preschool. All these do this amazing work for people that they don't know about because it's always the last piece of their budget, right? They don't have marketing. They don't have people, you know, talking about them, but they do this amazing work for us. So how do we as a community invest in ourselves? That's why I'm so proud of this community. Every SPET tax is passed. That's not true in other places in Wyoming. I grew up in Western Wyoming. They don't pass that stuff. They don't invest in themselves, and I think it's a missed opportunity.
I want to interject a question from the audience. Sure. I'm curious of where the money from state ground being a quarry product, where does the 60 cent per ton load go, if you don't mind addressing that question from a listener?
You know, I guess I don't know exactly what that question is, but I would expect if it's state land, most of it will go to the state, and we'll get a fraction of that. But if that person will leave their name and number, and I will go answer that question for them.
Very good. That question and then this one. Where does the fifth penny tax go that will be considered in the November 3rd general election? Where does that go, Pete?
So it goes to county and city operations and places like social services.
So that funds salaries and some of that stuff?
Yeah, it's, not necessarily salaries, but services that we can offer. So we have a community partners granting program from the 5th cent that goes to the nonprofits in our community. 37
groups and organizations that applied this year alone.
Yeah, and just amazing organizations. Thousands and thousands of people helped, but hundreds and hundreds of people employed in those industries here. And I think that's sometimes missed. Social service agencies are a large employer. Got to be top 10 in Albany County. And so how do we take that money and invest in ourselves? How do we invest in people? How do we invest in little kids so that they can have something to eat, get trained, so that the next great idea, the cancer diagnosis or the cancer cure might be in Linford Elementary this morning. And how do we get them so that they feel comfortable, that they get the best education possible, that they're not hungry, that they're sheltered, and so that they can show the world how amazing of a person they are. And I think I don't sell Albany County short. I think we have the solutions to a lot of the world and this country's problems. So let's invest in ourselves and let's find it out.
My last two questions. First, education. Where is Albany County School District within Albany County stand in status for a better tomorrow from your perspective as commissioner? And I know that the school district is kind of its own body within, but it's still part of the fabric of Albany County.
Well, it's an important part of the fabric of Albany County. I think to do a great job. they could always improve. I started my career as a high school history teacher. And so I have such regard for the people who do that job and do it well. You have to be skilled. You have to be talented to meet people where they are. Some of the people who come into your class will be language learners. Some of them will be tactile learners. Some will be visual learners. And you have to understand that within a few days and then tailor the information if you're doing a really good job. And then you have to make it exciting. Somewhere along the line, we have every little kid runs into school as a kindergartner. And sometimes we have to pull them in by a truck and a winch, right, at high school. Somewhere along the line, we need to make that love of learning continue, right, to make it exciting. Because I just really do think if you stop learning, you stop living and you stop improving. And it gets to be a real dull and dark world. So how do we continue the learning and how do we invest in the schools? I think it's important. I think it's more that could be done. I think they do a great job, and it's a hard job.
Albany County School District recently sold interest in Old Slade School elementary property to the city of Laramie. And that is cited for resident housing and residence. Is that divesting of public land and therefore commercializing it potentially, having that housing potentially go to BlackRock or Vanguard, or do you think that there's a better vision, more control, and we will do it more locally with maybe single families benefiting, be it apartments or single family resident housing types?
Well, I'd hope that the financing was done locally. I think we have the ability here. I don't know. I'm not in the inner workings of that conversation, but I do think, Slade, I have great memories of student teaching at Slade and substitute teaching there. My niece and nephew went to Slade. It's great. That old building was so super cool. But that's a great spot, right? All the infrastructure is around to make a bunch of affordable housing in a neighborhood and keep the neighborhood to be vibrant. And so I hope it doesn't go to BlackRock. I hope it doesn't go to Morgan Stanley. I hope there's other entities locally that will do the financing of that. But I think it's an important partnership to say, hey, housing's important to the school districts, important to the city, is important to the county. How do we make smart choices? How do we get the most, use the places that are already open, already surrounded by infrastructure to make good investments? And this is hopefully will be one of those really good investments people look back on and go, that was a turning point, right? They did a really smart thing. Got rid of a building that needed to come down, and then made something creative and interesting and useful for the community.
With respect to healthcare, what's Albany County do with respect to increasing the availability of affordable healthcare?
Well, I think if people look, our hospital does really well. Multiple $20 million a year profits, right? They have a duty to invest in the community. I sat on the hospital board for a few years, and I think there's more to be done. I really do think that this is one where the community has enough resources to have a really creative solution. There are people pushing the envelope on healthcare with home visits, mobile visits. For instance, in Costa Rica, they make sure the kids brush their teeth at school every day after lunch. And somebody supplies the toothbrush and sometimes supplies the toothpaste, and the teachers are trained. And so at least one time a day, that kid brushes their teeth. And that's an important piece of primary care. And, your health is impacted by that. So can you think differently? Can you get people out into the community? There's a huge opportunity with community health workers, embedded people in communities who walk around and say, hey, Mrs. So-and-so, did you take your prescription meds today? Let's go for a walk, right? Because that's healthcare. Community connection is healthcare. Checking in on folks before it becomes an emergency situation. That's really smart, because you keep somebody out of the emergency room who can't pay. Not only have you improved their life, but you've improved the bottom line of a healthcare system. And so we need to think more globally, more community-wide on how to make healthcare systems, energy systems, education systems more broad-based, with more people in the game.
Pete Gosar, our guest today on the Talk Shop, the Candidate Awareness Tour, ongoing now through November 3rd. And with people who show up, we have a unique opportunity to make people more aware, go to the polls the best informed possible. Was there anything that we didn't ask, you prepared to have asked, that you want to make sure we don't leave untouched before we close our segment together?
No, Eric, thank you so much for the opportunity. As you understand, I'm not a versed candidate. I'm not going to talk in platitudes. I believe in solution-based governance. And so when people bring an issue to me, I usually follow up with, what would you solve it? How would you solve it? Because I think that's important. And then I'll go and take their solution if they have one, and I'll talk to the road and bridge, or I'll talk to the clerk's office and say, hey, they thought about this. What are we not seeing? And so I think that's really important, to be a solution-based. And then I think it's, you deliver how you campaign is how you govern. And so if you're out meeting people at their doors and you're working hard, that's how you govern. And if you're not, that's also how you govern. And I think people really need to understand, they need to expect more from people. They need to expect them to pick up their phone. And if not, then maybe they shouldn't be a commissioner. Maybe they shouldn't be on the city council. And I think that's really important.
And with respect to your campaign, how do people best reach you through the campaign period? Early voting begins July 21st, and the primary in Wyoming, August 18th. So you have a nice wide window in order to early vote or vote on election day. But in between now and those important dates coming up, how do people best find out more detail, more information about Pete Gosar?
You can go onto Facebook with Gosar for Commissioner, PeteGosar@gmail.com, 307-760-3219 is my cell number. Any of those and all of those are ways to get a hold of me, and I really do appreciate it. And then, if you happen to be home on an afternoon or an evening, and you answer the door, we'll meet. That I know. Thank you, Eric.
Pete Gosar, today's guest in the Candidate Awareness Tour 2026 operation to send you to the polls, the best informed. The best vote is an informed vote, and it's open, this opportunity is open to all candidates, all races, all levels of government, be it local, county, state, or federal. We welcome the conversation here on the Talk Shop. The campaign trail runs through our classroom. We appreciate you listening.